Good day, my name's Rex Knight, and I'm the owner of the collection of Pearl Harbor items. It's going to be on exhibition at the Evansville Museum. I'd like to explain to you a little bit about how the collection came about. I've been a collector since I was 10 years old, so I've got over 50 years of experience at collecting historical items. But I've always, throughout those periods of years, been looking for, I guess you would say, my niche in the collecting world. And in 1999, I had an opportunity to purchase a grouping of items that belonged to a man by the name of Harry Morris. And Harry Morris was a chief torpedoman, and he was at Pearl Harbor during the attack, and after the attack, he was also one of the Navy divers that had to go and do a lot of the very terrible work of going into the sunken vessels and bringing out not only live ammunition and different objects that were still remaining inside the ships, but also the very terrible work of bringing out bodies. And so Harry had, in the process, taken a few objects as souvenirs. And those items came up for auction, and I was able to purchase those items, and that became the very first pieces of this collection. And you'll see the Harry Morris grouping in the collection here at the museum. That was in 1999, and since then there's been 2 decades of collecting that has went on, and you're going to see a great deal of many objects here at the museum. And just to give you some retrospect of what you're going to see, the collection is very specific. The collection is dealing with artifacts that are directly related to the attack, which is somewhat unique and unusual in the collecting world. All these items can tell a story. And the stories you will see along with the objects in the collection as you are able to go around and look at the different displays. To give you some retrospect also, if you were to go to Pearl Harbor today and you went to the visitor center and the museum there, they will tell you that they have in their collection over 67,000 artifacts. But of those artifacts, a very, very minute percentage is actually out on display. Most of them are locked up in a vault. And many of the artifacts that they have on display are really not directly related to the attack, but they are related to Pearl Harbor in some way. But they may be some modern pieces, not necessarily pieces that were actually there. In this collection, you're going to see over 125 different objects that were actually there or related to the attack shortly thereafter. And this is one of the things that I've always wanted to be able to do with the collection, is to be able to get it out to people and let them see what the stories are behind this. It's kind of like you're able to tell the story that someone from the past who is no longer here among us, you're able to tell the story of these people through the artifacts that they left behind. Hi, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the collection again, but also talk about my favorite piece out of the entire collection. There's a grouping that belonged to a young man by the name of Theodore Koyman. Theodore Koyman was a aircraft mechanic, and he was in the 98th Bomb Squadron. And he was actually at Hickam Field during the attack. Koyman was a very unique individual in my way of thinking, because I felt like that he was a very handsome young man. He was very energetic and quite daring in many ways. He was kind of a free spirit. And I always thought he would probably make a good, he could have made himself a movie star, I think, from the way that his life was. He certainly, I would see that there could have been a movie made about him because of all of his experiences and the type of individual he was. When he came to Pearl Harbor, he hadn't been there very long, and he went and purchased a motorcycle, and he began racing motorcycles when he had time off from the base. And so he was, like I said, he was one of these individuals who was pretty daring. And he actually was involved in some motorcycle crashes and got injured a couple times. He was also one that visited the bars quite often and got into some ruckus at bars and actually broke his hand in a fight. Was in the hospital for that. He ended up breaking a thumb and getting a concussion from one of these motorcycle accidents. Ended up in the hospital again. During that time, that was in September of 1941, and he was dismissed from the hospital in September, and he took with him a piece of paper from the hospital that was his discharge paper from the hospital, and he folded it up and he had stuck it in his wallet. And he had carried that with him from that point on until December the 7th, 1941. And that morning, he was still at Hickam Field when the bombers came in and began bombing the airfield. And perhaps for the first time in his young life, Theodore Koyman was scared. And he really didn't think he was going to survive that day. He was seeing other of his fellow servicemen being killed that day. The planes were blowing up all around. The hangars were being blown up. So there was not very many safe places to go. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of fear by many of the people that was there at the base at the time. Everything was happening so very fast. But he thought of the piece of paper that he had in his wallet, and he managed to find a pencil, and he took that piece of paper out from the hospital, and on the back, he began writing his mother a note. And basically, he was apologetic a little bit to his mother because he felt like that, his high-strungness from his younger days had put his mother through a lot, and that he had caused a lot of trouble for them that was probably unnecessary for his parents. And so he wanted her to know that he loved her and that basically he was thinking of her at this moment. And he mentioned in the note that they were bombing and, he wasn't sure of the outcome. And that note is very, very rare. There's a lot of letters that was written directly after the attack where servicemen would try to write a little bit to their families, let them know that they were safe. And they were, in those letters, there's not a lot of detail because there was censorship that occurred immediately after the attack. All letters were basically read by the military, and to make sure that nothing was in the letters that they didn't want the public to know or they didn't want the enemy to know. And so censors would read all the letters. They would mark out anything that they thought was sensitive information. And so many of the letters that was written or cards that were sent after the attack, and you'll see different examples of those throughout the collection, they were either void of any detailed information, or if the information was there, it was marked out and removed in some way. There are very few examples, and I don't know but just a couple of examples, and this being one, the Koyman note, of something that was actually written during the attack, as the attack was going on. And so it's a very, very rare occasion that you would see something like this. So there are some very unique pieces that that Coyman brought back as souvenirs, and from his letters that he had wrote afterwards, we were able to get a little bit more information about him. And he continued to be with the bomb squadron. Eventually became a crewman on one of the bombers and flew. So he was involved in the war, not only during the war itself, but he stayed in the service after the war for many years and retired from the service. So it's a very interesting story, but the favorite piece there being the note that he wrote during the attack, a very unique piece that you will not see in probably any other museum setting. I think the only other one that I'm aware of is in private hands.
To hear more stories like these, use your smartphone photo app to scan symbols like these throughout the exhibition.